Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys about something that is very, very intrinsic when you are dealing with trying to get to your higher self or higher consciousness. Now, as a higher self channeler, I can say this wholeheartedly. A lot of this information I'm sharing came through moving from what I call the pain body to the light body, moving from certain places in myself and doing this as a profession with others. And I want to share this with you guys because there are three major things that you can do as the individual that help you tap into the higher self. We move from the ego self to the higher self. So the three things I'm going to be talking about is in this series, because I'm going to break this up into three parts. Today's the first part, and I'm going to be focusing on something called victim mentality. Maybe you guys have heard of it, maybe you guys haven't, but realistically, we need to move and shift from the victim mentality in order to go from the ego self to the higher self. If we stay entrapped in three different places, which is scarcity, victim mentality, what I like to call flaws versus function. When you stay in these three spaces within yourself or within your pain body, it is very, very difficult to tap into the higher self, which is you, but it's a version of you or a space that you hold within your heart, within yourself, within your soul that you can't really tap into because you're bombarded. You have these lenses that are in front of your eyes because of these three situations or these three places of self that would need to be discussed. So today I'm going to be talking about victim mentality and what that means. So for those of you, maybe you understand that victim mentality is somewhat of a place that people need to go to as a security measure or a safety net. But eventually that same safety net or that same crutch becomes your battering ram. And what that means is it becomes the tool that you beat yourself with. And eventually it starts to injure you over time. So what I can say is that how you can identify if you are in this victim mentality is if you feel that most of your conversations when you're describing your life or your situation always involve pointing the fingers at other people. Oh, I am this way because of my ex. Oh, I am this way because of my friends. Or I am this way because of my children. You are deflecting from who you are, the I am, right? I am this way, and you deflect to another person. That is the first distinctive notice if you are in a victim mentality, because the onus is now on others versus yourself. So that's one thing I want to bring up. And what I will say is that I'm going to speak to what the shadow aspect is in this circumstance so that you have a better understanding. The second one that people tend to refer to when they are in this state is, oh, my circumstances. So a lot of persons feel like their position in life, their upbringing, who they surrounded themselves with, or let's say their status in life is the reasoning behind why certain things have not occurred for them in their lives. And I will talk and speak to that as well. The last one is divine reasons. Some of us get stuck in this haze of always blaming or putting all of the reasoning behind why we suffer in trauma or why we suffer, period, to the Lord or to God. You will hear this over and over again. They're like, oh, God did this. Oh, why would God do this? There, again, is this deflection and lack of onus. Okay? I'm going to give you guys these practical stories so that maybe you guys can understand where the wealth of knowledge comes from. But then I'm also going to talk about the shadow aspect so that you can actually do this deep dive for yourself. Some of you might need to take a piece of paper or a pen at some point and actually sit with yourself and say, what is it that I am still victimizing myself with? Why do I still stay in this pain body? What is the reason? Because like I said, you will carry that with you until it becomes your crutch, becomes your battering ram. So I just want to say, now when it comes to saying things like, it is my ex, right? It is my friends or it is my children that prohibit me in some way, let's just say. We need to realize is that the shadow is actually speaking to us in that moment. When people say the shadow, they think it's something dark and seedy, but really what the shadow is that one vulnerable place, that one simple truth that we are all not willing to admit. Okay. And in this case, when you start to say, oh, it's my ex, oh, it's my friends, it's my children, really and truly, the shadow aspect that you may not be facing is that you're not willing to admit that you're an enabler. You have enabled these relationships. Now, please know, when I'm talking, it's not because I have not been in every single one of these situations. I feel like as healers, what we have done and been afforded in our lives is we have been the victim more times than anyone can imagine. And only those that get through this type of scale of being can become the teachers or can become those that heal. Because if, let's say, for example, you don't even know you're in victim mentality. Let's say you're in a family that is all in victim mentality. You don't realize because it's so normal. Trust me, I have been there and I will maybe be there again one day, but I do have the tools now to recognize how I get out of it and how to recognize that I'm in it. So please know that when I'm saying these things, do not take offense, please, because really and truly, it's all about healing you. It's all about getting better. And if that's really what you want to do, then hear these truths and know that there is some kernel that speaks to your soul of validity. Okay. So if you're saying, oh, it's my ex, oh, it's my friends, oh, it's my children, you are the enabler of these relationships. Why? Because you are the one who chose that partner. You are the one who chooses to stay with these friends. You are the one, and in the case of children, you are supposed to be the disciplinarian. You are supposed to be their guiding light. With children, if you feel that your own children are putting you in a space where you feel like you're beneath them and you're a victim, you're not actually taking hold of what your position is as a parent. And I'm not trying to talk smack about parenting, because that's a very, very delicate subject. And trust me, I am a mom as well, and I know. But there are times that we have to realize that we are not our children's friends. Okay, we are their guidance. So if you feel that you're somebody who is in a place where you don't have that real true communication with your child, or your child takes advantage of you or puts you in places that are very belittling, that you feel small, you may have to take a course. You may have to do something that helps build that back up, puts you back in the position that you were meant to be in. And I am not the person to do that, but I'm just trying to show you with this little sentiment that maybe that it's because you're not putting into terms that you are the enabler. You enable your child to feel the way they do about you. You enable your child to put you down, and you enable it. And what I mean by enable, if you don't know what that term means, it means you allow it. At no point is someone putting a gun to your head to be with your ex, or to be with your partner, or to be with your friends. And there's nobody putting a gun to your head to still treat your children or act in the way you do with your children. And most of us feel like it's been so long, let's say, or it's been such a long time. And that's what I mean about the victim mentality being a crutch for some time. But eventually we beat ourselves with the same crutch, because eventually we become so small within ourselves. We give this power away to everyone else, saying it's all them, it's all them, it's all them. And we don't take the onus and responsibility back on ourselves. And that's what the shadow is designed to do, to say those really sad truths. And you will cry with that. Trust me. When I found out, most of the time when I was an enabler, when I took that real look at myself, I cried for days, because I was mad at myself for allowing it to happen. Back to that allowance. The power is always in the person. There's no one that can take away the power. You can only give it away. So I just wanted to leave you with that is the shadow aspect when you're pointing at people as the reasoning for why you stay in a victim mentality. The next thing I want to point out is the circumstances. So many times I have lived my life. I was brought up middle class, let's say. I wasn't brought up with rich parents. I wasn't brought up with rich family. We were well-to-do in the sense that we could afford a home, and we had, education and all that jazz. But in my lifetime, I've met many people that always blame circumstances for why they are where they are. And trust me, I raise my hand once again. And like I said, as healers, how we become who we become is because we've done the training and we got through it, and we're on the other side of it. Like, for example, most of why I say circumstances are important is because a lot of us pick up vices, specifically drinking and drugs and eating habits, in order to kind of sugarcoat our circumstances. And I know this is going to sound weird, but a lot of people, you'll hear the terms like, oh, I grew up poor, so I stay poor. Or I grew up with rich, belittling people, so I stay a rich, belittling person. Or I grew up middle class with lack of education, so I stay uneducated. You'll hear these terms over and over and over again. And I'm going to give you one little story, and this is the nugget of truth I hope you guys understand. So, and it shows you, and hopefully you can pull out what the shadow aspect is from this story. So I would say about a year ago, I went to my cousin's husband's birthday. Okay. And I don't know my cousin's husband that well. Obviously, he's in a separate part of the family. I don't know every single person in his. And I meet his whole family, who is predominantly Portuguese by birth. Okay. So I meet a gentleman at this party, and you have to understand that I was born in Canada, that I did not speak Portuguese at home. My dad was Irish, my mother was Portuguese, but she was a fully English speaker. She did not speak Portuguese in the home. So after my grandmother passed away, I spent several years in Portugal trying to learn the language, because I felt like that was part of my heritage that I had missed out on. That's the side note to this story. So I meet this gentleman who is well within his 50s at this party, and he's trying to go through the songs. He's trying to ask me how, to put on certain Portuguese songs. And I literally look at this man, as me being the one who went out of her way to go to Portugal to start to learn this language. I would say in my late 20s, I'm now almost 40. And it's been an ongoing process for me, taking the time and the awareness to get to know that language. But here's a man who just came from Portugal, from Portugal, born and raised, lived there his entire life, asking me how to type out and write into this jukebox or this karaoke machine the name of the song in Portuguese. And I sat there bewildered because I was like, how is it that I, a non-Portuguese person with very little to do in terms of like living there, I only lived there a year, was typing this out for this man who was in his 50s, who still at this point does not read or write Portuguese. And I was baffled. It was beyond me because I was like, wow. And all this person kept saying over and over was, my parents were poor, they didn't send me to school. My parents were poor, they didn't send me to school. And that just kept, that was the rhetoric. That's what he lived by. He didn't need to advance in his life because that was his story. That was his reason for never evoluting. So this is what I mean about how the circumstances can become your story of why you don't evolve, why we don't evolve in general, right? And I use this word because to me, it was all about this. The shadow is trying to say that unfortunately, you were not bothered or you were too lazy to be encouraged to try. And I know you might think that I'm saying this in a very slack presentation, but that is the truth. If someone takes it upon themselves to be educated, that takes gumption, that takes time, that takes effort. If you could sit back and say, oh, I never learned because my parents are poor, that's a lazy attempt at life. So a lot of us don't realize that we are using these lazy excuses for why we don't prosper or grow in our lives. A lot of people that drink, or a lot of people that, you know, eat obesively, or a lot of persons that have any type of drug vices, you'll notice that a lot of persons like this, and I'm not trying to generalize because I too have been a drunk, I have been in drugs, I have rehabilitated over the course of a decade to be where I am right now. I quit smoking, drinking, weed, any other drugs you can think of. I mean, aside from some of the harder ones, but I was also in this pain body for many years, and it took me many years to get over all of it. And what I'm trying to say is that what I had to recognize within myself is that I kept blaming my circumstances. I kept saying, oh, I drink because all of my family drank. Oh, I drink because everyone I know, my friends drink. And that goes back to my first topic, right? About realizing that we put ourselves in this deflection of persons. So not only do we make our circumstances a deflection, we make the persons a deflection. So I just wanted to point that out. The shadow aspect of this is that we would rather stay in the vices, or we would rather stay impoverished of soul and being, than to try to thrive, to try to learn, to try to elevate. And that's what the shadow is describing to us, that we are lazy and we don't want it. And you know how infuriating that term is to most people, because they're like, I'm not lazy. I know, it's because of these people. Trust me, I've been there. I've raged out just like the rest of you. But the reality is that that is the truth. That is the shadow of you staring back at you that you don't want to see. Because should you see it, you must change. And that's why people don't like facing the shadow, because then you're like, uh-oh, I know the truth now. Now I just have to admit that I'm lazy. Now, some people can go to that place and stay there, but it's hard for them to vocalize it out to the populace because they will lose favor with those that are in a more functional position. But I'm saying to you, the shadow is a part of us we don't want to admit. So when people think it's some dark place, it's like, no, it's just the truth. That's the truth part that we're not wanting to look at. The last one I'm going to talk about is the one that it embroils me, but it's totally understandable, is the divine reason. Blaming everything on our Lord or our God. It doesn't matter what God. It doesn't matter if it's Yahweh, Allah, Vishnu, Buddha, God, whatever creator you bow to. Most of us on this planet tend to go to this place, and it's not unwarranted because, again, as someone who has lost many, many loved ones, and I mean many, family, friends, suicide, etc., I've been there. We blame a lot of our death and our grief on God. How could God do this to us? How could God put us in these positions? How dare God do this? Many of us have said those words because we don't know what to do with the grief. We don't know what to do with the sorrow, and we don't know what to do with the loss. Okay? It's a scary place. No one wants to be there because really what we're really saying is that we are lost. We are in pain and we are suffering. And we can't fathom why God, this supposedly great and omniscient being, would put us as her children in this place. Why must we suffer? Why must this be? Because it's an ugly place for us to go to. But the thing is that when it comes to grief and sorrow and loss, one must always understand that this is a phase of life. Some of us stay in it for a very extended period of time. I know of persons that have lost, let's say, partners, and they've never moved on. They have been in grief and loss longer than they were with the person that they lost. Like there's one particular woman, I'm not going to name names that I know of, who was only with this person for 5 years and has been grieving the loss of this person for 20. And it's like, why does somebody do that? It's because A, they don't want to look at what is predominantly staring right at them. And this is for all of us. The reason why you don't want to get out of that grief and loss is because should you heal, should you be in a place where you can allow it to be let go, you may be susceptible again. But if you always stay in the loss, if you always stay in the grief, if you're always blaming God for all of the malady and the disbelief and misunderstanding that you feel, it gives you some of a feeling that there is a chance that it will go away. That is the lie. Because the thing is that we must understand, even as animals do, that death is prevalent. You know, it doesn't make any sense. And trust me, you need to go through the processes. They are there for a reason. No one can just watch somebody die and pick up the next day. That is impossible. But you also have to realize is that you're not doing any service to the person who passed away by staying in that mentality for as very long as you are. That victim mentality, that woe is me place, keeps you low, keeps you from happiness, from joy, from finding new love, from finding new purpose in your life, or repurposing what the loss represented. Like sometimes if you're, let's say, a parent who's lost a child, sometimes you may start up a group or do something fantastic with that loss that can help others move on. But if you stay in that loss for too long, you lose yourself. So what I will say, this is so delicate. If you are someone who blames the Lord or God for your for your losses and your grief, I will say this is an inevitability. This is something that we see in our nature. This is something that we see everywhere. Is it fair? No. War, is it fair? No. But again, you must understand that war is not made by God. War is made by man. So if you are very upset about certain things like this, please just learn to direct them at the real causes. Like, it's socio-political in the case of war. It's man-made when it has to do with war. Is the grief the same? Yes. Can it be blamed on God? No. Because God and any deity that you are, waving that fist at is watching this scenario, because it's not for us to contemplate why these things occur. Only through loss sometimes can we plant new seeds. And only in loss can we learn to do something different. And that is one of the biggest teachers that loss can provide us. And that's what the shadow is about. The shadow is where you go if you should learn and use that kernel of loss and turn that pain into a success of some sort. And that's when you transmute, and that's when you change. Because sometimes we like to live in that victim mentality because that in some respects keeps the person alive, but it's not keeping them alive. The memory is there with you always. And if you want to move in a place where they would be proud of you, where you can be proud of you, you have to let it go. So I will say this, as someone who has gone through times of grief in my life, I know it's hard. But if I'm upsetting you by what I'm saying, maybe you should shut me off, because it's not that time yet. You're not ready yet. But there may come a time when you are. And you may have to move through those processes. And you may move from blaming God to blaming others to blaming the circumstances as well as you move through that processes. But I will say this, eventually you will end up having to blame yourself and forgive yourself at the same time. And that will be the next topic I talk about when it comes to flaws and function. That's the next process I'm going to speak of. And then the last one is scarcity. Thank you for joining me, guys. This has been a conversation about how you move from the ego mind to the higher self. Have a great day. Bye-bye for now.